Everyone knows that Sega has put out some of the best beat-em-ups in the genre. With smash hits like the Golden Axe series and the Streets of Rage games, it leaves little doubt of Sega's beat-em-up heritage. But not all of Sega's beat-em-ups were winners. In fact, they've released some of the worst beat-em-ups you will ever find in the arcades. In this episode of the Big Retro Show, I'm going to talk about some of them. The 80s and 90s were great times to be a kid. Join me as I dive into the world of movies, music, video games and toys, and explore what made these decades so great. This is the Big Retro Show. Boy, did I really want to like DD Crew. All of the elements of a great beat-em-up were there. 4 characters to choose from, a gritty setting, and most importantly, the Sega name. But this game is just so hilariously bad that I regret spending my time playing it for this episode. To start off, the hit detection in this game is extremely wonky. You can be right next to an opponent, hit the attack button, and miss them somehow. If you do connect with them, you are likely to get hit back in the middle of your combo. I've never seen a beat 'em up do this, and it makes me wonder, what were the game creators smoking? Although you get to choose from 4 main characters, it doesn't matter who you choose. They all suck. There's a stereotypical big dude, the fast dude, the balanced dude, and the dude who does toe touches to attack you. Yes, cheerleader toe touches. The moveset is as basic as it comes, and the fighting is extremely repetitive. You basically get just an attack and a jump button. It's extremely difficult to get your licks in. The characters each have one grapple attack, but to execute it, you must press both jump and attack buttons at once when your enemy is weak enough. You do get to do a special dash attack if you press both the attack and jump buttons at the same time while dashing. But this too is broken. You basically need the entire length of the screen and to time your special dash attack just right, or you will collide with your target and get knocked back. Usually in beat 'em up, special attacks are not blockable. Not so with this disaster of a game. The other thing about the attacks is that you never know what is going to work. For example, at some times you can pick up your enemies from the ground, hold them over your head and slam them down, but this is inconsistent and you can't do it all the time. The enemies in this game are ugly and don't really fit well together. For example, at any given moment you will be fighting this dude in karate pajamas, and then a dude looking like Saddam Hussein runs in and attacks you. Mind you, Saddam is holding a machine gun, but you think he ever fires it at you? Nope. It just doesn't make any sense. Why bring a gun to a fight and not use it? The game also lacks any interesting weapons you can use aside from an occasional knife and a grenade. The other thing about the enemies is that they come in different colors to make it appear that they are different in some way, but in reality, they don't get any special attacks or powers. It's just a color swap. The graphics in this game are decent, but it's misleading, because while the graphics are okay, the gameplay is straight garbage. The sound in this game starts out funky but quickly becomes repetitive. It's mostly a hip-hop soundtrack and it bleeds of 90s cheese. Just what are they saying? The bosses in this fight are comical, but not for the good reasons. It's because they are just so difficult to hit, but they can hit you just fine. Now, this is not a good game, but it's relatively obscure, and if you ever see it in the wild, I would pass it by. It's that bad. Avoid this game at all costs. I think we can all thank Sega that this arcade game was never ported to the home console. In an arcade genre that is a bit crowded, games need to stand out to attract gamers. Arabian Fight aimed to do just that when it released in 1992 with a theme not often seen in arcade rooms. The premise is familiar: rescue the princess from her kidnappers that want to use her as a sacrifice. You play as one of 4 warriors who must complete 7 stages fighting mythical monsters and human enemies. Sinbad, probably a misspelling of Sinbad, is a swashbuckler of the bunch. Ramaya, who we later learn is the sister of the kidnapped princess Lorana, is the sole female character. Goldor is a big powerful dude of the bunch, and Data is the warrior monk. Other than their movesets and magic, there is no real advantage to using one character or the other. This game uses a scaling mechanic that you don't often see in beat-em-ups, and it's for a good reason. While scaling is a nifty trick, it takes away from the flow of the game and really doesn't add anything of value to it. What's more is your character scales in and out as you move from foreground to background, but the background itself stays in place, which cheapens the effect. The combat in this game is okay. It's not as bad as the DD Crew by a long shot. You have a basic attack and jump button. Pushing both buttons at the same time will let your character do a special attack at the cost of some of your health. If you find a genie's lamp in the level, you can use a special magic attack by pressing both jump and attack as well. There's nothing groundbreaking here, and I'm grateful you can do some grappling. The hit detection in this game acts a bit wonky, and that's because of the scaling functionality of the game. I think if they did away with it, everything wouldn't be as jerky. The boss battles in this game are pretty uneventful, unfortunately. But they are head and shoulders better than DD Crew, which isn't saying much. Luckily, the game's levels are short and you can burn through this game in under an hour. The game's story is told through anime-style cutscenes and look good. The game's music and graphics look good too, the latter using colorful sprites and a hefty dose of parallax scrolling. In certain portions of the game, you get a glimpse of the enemy drawn as a cartoon in the foreground, and when they jump into the game field, they are drawn as sprites. It's weird at first, but you get used to it. This game did not receive any home console ports, probably for the reasons I stated above. In all, Arabian Fight isn't as bad as DD Crew, but it's not much better. Is Riot City better than the Sega beat-em-ups I mentioned previously? Not exactly, but it's a good effort. Riot City is a type of beat-em-up that has hints of other great beat-em-ups, but doesn't quite measure up to the others. You play as one of two dudes named Paul and Bobby, who must take out the evil crime syndicate called MID. It's also apparent that they kidnapped Paul's girlfriend, which I didn't find out until the end of the game. There's not much in the way of story here, but that's not a problem. It is a beat-em-up after all. The main problem with Riot City is that its combat is extremely repetitive. You get a basic attack and jump button. The combos are pretty standard and you can do a jump kick as well. Pushing both buttons at the same time will make your character do a special attack at the cost of some health. And that's about it. There's nothing else for you to try or discover. No dash attacks? No dashing at all, in fact. The lone grapple attack is welcoming, but it's nothing to write home about. The other issue I have with the combat is there are 0 weapons for you to use. I mean, come on, even the earliest beat-em-ups like Double Dragon allowed you to use a bat and a knife. But this one doesn't allow you to use weapons. The enemies in this game are equally repetitive. You will fight the same 4 or 5 dudes with different color palettes through the entire 5 levels of this game. The bosses in this game, however, do have a lot of character, even if they rip off some of the famous fighters like this dude, who is obviously a nod to Bruce Lee. At any rate, the bosses are a high point in this game. The other high points of this game are its graphics and music. Both are true retro goodness and remind me a lot of Final Fight. The character sprites used in this game are big and colorful, and I have 0 complaints about them. This game was not released outside of Japan and did not receive any home ports. While this game was highly repetitive and boring at times, I'm glad I played through it so I never have to play it again. With a name like Tough Turf, you wouldn't expect a game to suck as bad as this Sega Sunsoft beat-em-up released in 1989. What can be said about this god-awful beat-em-up? First, the hero is dressed in some slacks and a dress shirt and tie. Not exactly the garb you want to wear when entering the Tough Turf. Are they going for a job interview or something? Secondly, the combat is extremely janky, much like you would expect from an office worker fighting off some thugs. You get a kick, punch, and jump button. If you press the jump and either kick or attack, nothing happens. I mean, what the F? Haven't they heard of the time-honored beat-em-up move called the jump kick? Weapon use in the game? Well, it does exist, but the weapons, much like the combat, are janky. You actually have to press both kick and punch buttons to pick up the weapons. It's weird. This game also lacks any special attacks whatsoever. As much as I hate special attacks that drain your energy, I started to miss them in this game. I guess you don't know what you got until it's gone. The graphics and sound of this game are extremely drab. The muted colors they use don't do the game any favors. The sounds are basic synthesizer tones and are downright ugly. Your character moves so slow. Grapple moves? Forget about it. Dash attacks? Nah. Your character can't even run. The animations used for the combat in this game are laughable as well. Take a look. It looks like an early draft of a Double Dragon game or something. They didn't even bother to tell you why you dressed so neatly and entered the tough turf. It's just put a quarter in and go. No story or explanation. Overall, this game is a stinker and one that you will want to avoid at all costs. To no one's surprise, this game did not receive any home ports. Still, this is one of the rarest beat-em-ups released by Sega in Japan and Sunsoft in the US. Last but not least is Mazen Wars Mazen Saga. The reason that Mazen Wars is featured in this episode is not entirely its fault. You see, it appeared in Sega's Mega Play arcade cabinet as a way for Sega to bring the home console experience to the arcades. While this is a decent beat-em-up for a home console, it doesn't quite live up to the top arcade beat-em-ups of the era. Released in 1993, Mazen Wars is a hybrid beat-em-up fighting game in which you take control of Koji Kabuto, who dons a Mazinger Z armor to fight off the evilness of the land. It's based on a popular Mazen Saga mecha manga, which I have no clue about, but fans of the manga got their game on the Sega Genesis by way of Vic Tokai. At any rate, this game looks and plays like a Sega Genesis game, because it is, and plays about as well as the Avengers port for the Sega Genesis. You get basic attack and jump buttons, and a special attack button that expends your life when you use it. The combat in this game doesn't lend itself towards a classic beat 'em up, as many of your enemies are hard to fight because they're always jumping. So much so that most of the fighting I did in this game was by way of jump attacks. You can do a spinning sword attack if you dash, jump, and then attack, and I found myself spamming this move quite a bit. The attack combo you belt out if you take on enemies straight up is nothing spectacular, but you do end the combo with a multi-slash attack. The enemies in this game look interesting and fit with the overall theme of the game. The bosses of this game are challenging, and some, like this first stage boss, are downright frustrating. It took me forever and a day to beat this boss, and it shouldn't be like that. The second stage boss was not as bad. After beating the beat 'em up stage boss, you take on the real boss of the level in a one-on-one fighting game. The fighting game, however, is extremely uneventful and downright boring. I was trying all type of attacks on my opponent. Charge attacks, half circle attacks that I often use in the fighting games that I play. And this one didn't let me pull off any special moves at all. It just let me jump, attack, and block. That's about it. There's no excuse in my mind for the lack of special moves in a one-on-one fighting game, and this is why this game sucks. The graphics and settings of the game are high points, but nothing spectacular. Overall, you probably won't find this game in the arcades, but if you want to play it, you can buy a copy for your Sega Genesis for $48 loose and $155 complete in box, according to PriceCharting.com. Overall, I would avoid this game as well if you spot it in the arcades. But if you find it at a flea market for $5, grab it. And that's gonna do it for the Big Retro Show. Let me know in the comments below what game you consider the worst beat 'em up of all time. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel and leave this video a thumbs up. And I will catch you next time on the Big Retro Show.